In a world of hearthlight and herbs, where care was given by steady hands, we walk through the quiet rooms of healing, from village cottages to monastic halls, through baths, gardens, and the hush of night prayers. This is how the Middle Ages mended the body and soothed the spirit. Every village in the Middle Ages had its quiet source of hope when sickness came. It was not the grand physician with Latin books or the surgeon with glittering knives, but someone humbler and closer, the village healer. Sometimes a gray-haired woman with apron full of herbs, sometimes an old man who knew wounds and weather, sometimes a mother whose skill had passed from grandmother to daughter. Though the church sometimes eyed these folk with suspicion, their work was as old as the fields themselves. The healer's day begins early. Before most villagers stir, she steps into dew-wet garden behind her cottage. Rows of sage, thyme, and rue glisten silver. A little fence guards foxglove and henbane, potent plants that heal or harm depending on hand that uses them. She bends close to sniff, fingers gentle, cutting sprigs of mint for stomach aches, yarrow for bleeding, and marigold for wounds. Herbs are tied in bundles to dry in rafters or crushed fresh for use. Inside her small house, the air smells rich, dried lavender, beeswax, vinegar, smoke. Shelves hold clay jars labeled in rough script or carved signs: honey, tallow, goose grease, powdered bark, spirits of wine. Mortars stand ready to grind roots. Bandages of linen hang drying. A small crucifix often watches over all. Many healers are devout, praying as they mix remedies, though some whisper older charms learned long ago. Soon come the first visitors. A farmer with swollen knee from long work, a mother carrying fevered child, a shepherd bitten by dog. They enter softly, hats in hand. The healer listens more than she speaks, eyes keen to color of skin and sound of breath. She may feel forehead for heat, check tongue, smell wound for rot. No fine tools here, only experience and patient observation. For aches and fevers she brews infusions, willow bark for pain, meadowsweet for fevers, chamomile for restless sleep. For wounds she cleans with wine or vinegar, packs with honey or resin to keep out corruption, binds with linen. Burns are cooled with ointment of lard and herbs, chest coughs eased with thyme syrup and warm compress. If spirits sag, she may recommend prayer, storytelling, or charms tied at wrist. Not all healing is of body alone. Birth brings her most urgent work. When labor starts, a husband runs to fetch healer and midwife if different person. She arrives with warm cloths, sharp knife for cord, knowledge of herbs to ease pain or stop bleeding. Candles burn low, prayers to saints and whispered charms mingle. If birth goes well, she blesses babe, swaddles tight, and counsels new mother on nursing. If trouble comes, her hands and courage are last defense before prayer alone remains. Herbs are the healer's language. She knows where wild garlic grows damp in spring, how to dig dandelion roots, when to cut nettle for strength, how to dry rose hips for winter. She teaches children to gather carefully and say thanks to earth. Dangerous plants, hemlock, belladonna, mandrake, she handles with respect and secrecy. Tales say these are witches' tools, but to healer, they are medicine if wisely used. She learns also from animals, how dogs lick wounds clean, how bees seal hive against disease, how deer seek certain leaves when ill. Nature is her great book. Yet she may also consult an actual book if one exists, perhaps a worn herbal passed from priest or literate friend, with drawings of plants and notes in Latin or local tongue. Though trusted, the healer walks thin line. Church approves care but frowns on charms or old pagan rites. A healer might quietly cross herself while muttering older blessing. She might leave offerings at holy well, but never speak too loud of it. If cure fails or illness spreads, fear can turn neighbors' trust to suspicion. Some healers face accusation of witchcraft in dark times. Others are honored lifelong, buried with candles and prayer. Economy shapes her life. Payment is rarely coin, more often eggs, bread, ale, or small service. A healed farmer may plow her plot, a grateful mother might spin wool. The healer lives modestly but seldom goes hungry. Lords sometimes summon her for stable or kennel. Animals need care too and reward with grain or protection. Season changes her work. Spring fills baskets with fresh greens to cleanse winter humors. Coughs linger from cold months. Summer brings cuts and heat fevers. Childbirth amid field work. Bee stings and sunstroke. Autumn means harvest accidents, preserving herbs for winter, easing aching backs. Winter is hardest, lung fevers, frostbite, hunger wasting the weak. Her cottage glows warm with drying herbs and steaming broths. She may walk miles through snow to reach sickbed. Her reputation travels beyond village. Wayfarers ask directions to her door. Peddlers bring rare roots in trade. Some lord's men know to seek her if hurt far from town. Yet she stays humble, tied to rhythm of her people. Baptisms, marriages, burials. She sees life's full circle more intimately than most, and carries those memories quietly. At night, after last visitor gone, the healer tends her fire and mixes tomorrow's salves. She thinks of those she helped and those she could not save. Sometimes she prays long and hard, knowing limits of her craft. Yet she also smiles at simple victories, a child's fever broken, a cut healing clean, a mother and babe sleeping safe. Outside, village lies dark and silent. Inside, jars glow in firelight, promise of care awaiting dawn. So when you picture medieval medicine, do not see only surgeons in cities or physicians in scholars' robes. Remember this quiet cottage where herbs dry in beams, where wisdom passed mouth to ear heals countless small hurts. The village healer stands as bridge between wild nature and fragile human life, steady as the seasons. At the far edge of the village, where the hedgerow thickens and the lane grows narrow, a low cottage leans into the shelter of an alder tree. Its walls are of wattle and daub, lime-washed and softened by years of weather, and its thatch is patched with fresh reeds that gleam pale in the morning light. Smoke rises from a small clay-capped chimney, thin and blue, and the air around the door is fragrant with drying herbs. Bees drift lazily between the flowers that press close to the step, and a wooden charm, simple and weathered, hangs from the lintel and turns gently when the wind comes. Within lives the herb wife, a woman called Mira by the villagers, though some of the oldest still use her mother's name by mistake. She wakes before the bell in the church tower, guided by the birds and the color of the sky, and sits a moment on her bed to listen to the weather in the thatch and the creak of the alder. Her hands are lined and stained green at the nails, her hair caught back with a strip of linen. Before she stirs the hearth, she speaks a brief prayer, more habit than ceremony, asking blessing on the day's work and on those who will come to her door. The cottage opens into a single room where shadows rest pleasantly on rafters blackened by years of smoke. Bunches of herbs hang from those rafters in neat clusters, sage like soft grey tongues, fennel umbels crisp and straw-coloured, lavender blue as dusk, and rosemary sprigs stiff as tiny brooms. Shelves along the walls hold earthenware jars marked in a careful hand, each tied with waxed linen, comfrey root, yarrow, poppy heads, mint, chamomile, rue. In the corner stands a wide table worn smooth by knives and pestles, its surface scattered with crumbs of bark and the dust of pounded leaves. Mera coaxes embers to flame with a twist of straw and sets a small iron pot upon the trivet. She adds a cup of well water and a pinch of rosemary, letting the steam wake the room with clean, resinous scent. Bread left from yesterday's baking warms on a flat stone by the coals, and she eats it with honey combed last week from a neighbor's hive as payment for a salve. While she eats, she unwraps a bundle of clean cloths from the chest and lays them out to air, for one never knows what the day will bring. The garden behind the cottage is the true heart of her craft. It is its grand, but it is tended with love. Narrow beds edged with river stones, paths dusted with crushed shells to keep snails away, a small willow hurdle to shield tender greens from wind. Here grow the plants she knows like kin plantains, sitting low and patient, calendars bright as little suns, mint crowding its corner with cheerful insistence, and tall angelica keeping watch in light jade towers. At the far fence, elder leans over, heavy with umbels that will later turn to berries dark as night. She takes up a willow basket lined with a clean cloth and goes out barefoot into the dew. The grass cools her soles in the morning, is full of soft sounds, bees waking with a surprised buzz, a wren disputing the hedge, a cart far off on the road. Mera harvests with restraint, pinching mint tips where the stems offer themselves, cutting comfrey leaves above the crown so the plant will return, and slipping a knife beneath calendula blooms to coax bright heads into the basket. Each cut is measured, for she keeps count in her mind of what the garden can give without misery. By the well she pauses to gather watercress for her own noon bite, then returns to the table inside, where the morning light lies pale and square across the boards. She sorts the basket into small heaps, fresh for infusions, stout-leaved for drying, blossoms for salves. The knife flickers in her hand, trimming, splitting, easing stems into bundles which she ties loosely with linen thread and hangs upon a prepared line near the hearth, where warmth will coax them dry. Some she lays upon reed mats by the window, where sun slips in like a quiet guest. Before the day grows hot, she walks to the edge of the meadow with a hooked stick and a small sack, seeking what her garden cannot furnish. There is wood betony near the old stone where sheep rub their wool, and in the dip by the brook grows meadowsweet, its scent like clean hay with a whisper of almond. She thanks each place aloud in a voice not much louder than breath, a habit learned from her mother and never dropped. By the time the bell rings once from the distant church, Her sack holds modest treasures, a few strips of willow bark, a handful of red clover heads, and a twist of wild thyme from the broken wall. When she returns, the first visitor of the day is waiting by the door, a young man shifting from foot to foot with anxiety more than pain. He shows a hand split across the palm where a tool slipped, the edges clean but gaping like the mouth of a fish. Mera guides him to the bench and pours warm water into a basin, adding a few leaves of thyme and a single drop of wine kept in a corked bottle. She bathes the cut without fuss, her hands steady as stones in the brook, and speaks to him of nothing in particular until the tremor leaves his voice. She brings out a strip of linen, a needle, and a twist of gut thread finely scraped and dried in the rafters. With 3 small stitches she closes the wound, then lays upon it a fold of linen spread with a paste of honey and ground calendula. The young man watches her with surprised calm, as if the neatness of the act has bewitched him. She binds the hand and ties the ends with a firm knot, then gives him a small packet of dried yarrow with the instruction to steep a pinch and drink if heat rises. He leaves a wedge of cheese on her table and promises to keep the hand clean. Soon after comes an older woman from the mill house, her eyes strained with sleeplessness, born of 2 small children and the grindstone's ceaseless rumble. Mera listens more than she speaks, offering a stool and cool water sweetened with a fingertip of honey. For this weariness she prepares a tisane of chamomile and a leaf of lemon balm from the pot at the door, and shows the woman how to breathe the steam with a cloth tent over her head. She sends her away with a little sack of the same, and a charm to set by the children's cradle that is really nothing but lavender bound with a blue thread. When the lane is empty again, the herbwife turns to her own workbench. She grinds dried comfrey root to a fine powder, mixing it with warmed goose fat and beeswax to make a salve smooth as cream. Into another pot she pours oil infused with rosemary sprigs that have drunk sunlight for weeks in a stoppered jar. This she strains through linen and stores for the winter aches that creep into joints when the frost begins to silver the well rope. In between she keeps her ledger, a scrap-bound set of pages where she marks not names but signs. The cartwright with the red scarf, the girl with ash-gray hair, the shepherd who smells of smoke. At midday the sun leans hot against the thatch, and the garden buzzes like a spun hive. Mera sits in her doorway with bread and cress and a slice of apple, eating slowly while her cat curls against her feet and paws at the shadow of a bee. She closes her eyes against the brightness and listens to the village beyond the hedgerow clack of a loom, a child's shriek, the slow creak of a wagon on the slope. She has lived long enough to know that the world will find its way to her whether she watches for it or not. A cart does indeed arrive, halting by the gap in the hedge. 2 men lift down a boy who clutches his side, his face pale and shining with the sheen of fear. He fell from a hayrick, they say, and the boy nods with shame as if gravity were his fault. Mera brings him in and checks him with hands that learn by touch, ribs tender but unbroken, breath shallow but full. She brews a small cup of willow bark and meadowsweet, bitter as good medicine often is, and sweetens it with honey. While it cools, she mixes a poultice of bruised plantain and a little vinegar, and lays it where the ache burns. The boy's shoulders drop by degrees, and in an hour he is able to sit straight. She warns the men to let him rest, and not to put him to the rake for 2 days, and she knots a length of woven wool around his waist, as a gentle reminder. They grumble about the hay, but thank her all the same, leaving a coil of rope as payment because coin runs thin in summer. Mera sets the rope by the door, knowing it will serve to bind the bean frames when the wind turns wild. Afternoon is given to drying and sorting. She lifts the herbs from the lines and crumbles them between her fingers, catching the fragments in broad wooden bowls. The colors dull as they dry, but their scents sharpen. Mint like a spring opened, yarrow like clean fields after rain, sage like an old song hummed deep in the throat. She fills small parchment packets and ties them with thread, printing a neat mark on each shape of the leaf or the memory of the flower to guide her hand in dim light. A traveler stops at her gate with dust to his knees and a skin of water slapping against his hip. He asks for nothing but a moment of shade, yet Mera sees the heat in his eyes and the drift of his stance. She wedges a stool in the alder's cool and gives him nettle tea cool from the well, flavored with a sprig of mint and the thinnest curl of apple peel. He drinks and finds his voice again, speaking of the long road through dry fields and the stone bridge that sings at night when the river is low. Before he goes, he asks for something to ease the ache in his shoulders, and she rubs rosemary oil into the knots while he sits silent, as still as a dozing ox. As shadows lengthen, she tends her small still, a clay-bellied vessel set over gentle coals. From it she draws waters not strong as spirits, but scented with the memory of leaves, rose water for reddened skin, mint water to ease faintness, and a meager draught of lavender that she uses with thrift for the fevers that trouble children's dreams. The drip is slow and very precious. She folds each drop into a stoppered bottle and writes upon the cork in ink made from oak galls gathered last autumn. Not all who come for healing are ill in body alone. A young wife arrives with eyes red from weeping, her voice trapped somewhere behind her ribs. She cannot speak the reason, or thinks she cannot, so Mera places a kettle on the coals and sits beside her until tears have run their course. She makes a tea of motherwort and balm and a thread of honey, and teaches a simple breathing that is no spell but helps all the same. When the woman leaves, she carries not only a small packet of herbs, but also a pebble smooth as moonlight to keep in her apron as a reminder that hands can find stillness, even when the heart cannot. Once in the hour before dusk, danger arrives, a child with a deep splinter driven under the nail by a cracked bucket stave. He is brave until he sees the knife, then trembles as any child would. Mera makes a paste of flaxseed and warm water and lays it over the finger to soften the skin, then waits long enough to sing a lullaby under her breath. When she lifts the paste, the splinter has loosened. She draws it out with the tip of her knife, while the mother tells a funny story about a duck that learned to knock at the door with its beak. The child laughs and the blood brightens, and the fright runs out of him like water from a tipped pail. As the bell in the far tower calls the hour before Vespers, Mera steps into the garden with a small basket and a pair of shears. Evening is the time for flowers that close against noon glare to open again. She gathers a few last calendulas and the day's first night-scented stock, placing them in the basket not for medicine, but to sit in a jar by the bed of an old woman who finds sleep easier when the air smells of something gentle. The herb wife believes beauty has its own kind of healing, and she counts it among her simples. Back inside, she tidies the table and banks the fire so it will hold a quiet core of heat. She strains a pot of oil in which comfrey leaves have steeped, darkening it to the color of moss, then stirs in beeswax until the mixture thickens and gleams. While the salve cools, she writes by the door with a bit of chalk the plants safe to pick, tomorrow mint, yarrow, chickweed, so that the neighbor girl who come at first light to help will know what to gather. When all is in order, she sits on the threshold with her bowl and eats her simplest meal, porridge with a spoon of honey and a curl of apple, a heel of bread dipped in the juice of pickled beet and a pinch of salt. The lane is quiet, save for an ox snorting in its sleep and the murmuring talk of swallows on the thatch. Mera thinks of the faces who came today and names them one by one in her heart like counting beads. She prays in this manner, with names and scents and the small sounds each person makes when they breathe. The last visitor is a figure from the abbey, a lay brother who travels with a lantern tucked inside his cloak so the wind cannot find it. He brings a message from Brother Oilric. A woman in childbed grows weary and will not be comforted by words alone. Mera takes her to leather bag where everything has a place, hooks, cloths, a fir cone to squeeze, small vials of lavender water and rose, a cord plaited from soft wool to pull upon, and she follows the brother through lanes rich with evening odors of smoke and damp soil. In the house where the woman labors, the air is tight with fear and the press of too many voices. Mera asks for quiet and is granted it, for though she is only a herb wife, the village trusts her calm. She bathes the woman's brow with lavender water and sets the wool cord in her hands, telling it to pull when the pain climbs and to breathe when it falls away. Between pains, she rubs the woman's back with rosemary oil and hums a tune so old it might be only breath. Hours pass like a slow tide. At last the child comes red and outraged and perfect. Mera lays the infant on the mother's chest and laughs softly, the sound no louder than the creak of a cradle. She leaves them wrapped in a peace that feels like snowfall on thatch, and steps back into the night with the lay brother, who gives her a grateful smile that shows all his years at once. The stars are brittle bright, and the hedges smell of cool earth. Somewhere, an owl calls from the oak by the mill pond. When she reaches her cottage, she sets down the bag and washes her hands with mint water in the bowl by the door, then closes the latch and thanks the unseen world for gentleness granted. Inside, the cottage rests like a sleeping beast. The hanging herbs are black shapes against the rafters. The jars hold moonlight caught and softened into muted gleam, and the table shows the tracks of the day, stains of sap, a smudge of wax, a single calendula petal stuck to the grain. Mera banks the hearth to ashes, sets a kettle of water aside for morning, and slips the chalkboard into the niche by the door so it will greet the dawn with instructions ready. She lies down on her narrow bed with the window open to the garden. Night air pours in with the cool scent of mint and earth. Beyond the hedgerow a fox barks once and moves on, leaving no trouble behind. Her cat settles into the hollow of her knees and purrs like bees a field away. The herb wife closes her eyes and sees not faces but leaves, each with its remembered use, each with the memory of the day's sun upon it. Sleep takes her as gently as a shawl laid over shoulders. Tomorrow she will wake before the bell, listen to the alder, warm the bread, and step again into the dew. She will pick only what the plants can spare, measure with a careful hand, bind with linen, and set onto the shelf a little more hope for the ones who will knock at her door. The cottage will breathe its green breath, the garden will hum, and the lane will bring back the world in need of soft answers. And she, mirror of the hedge and the mortar, will answer as she always has, with leaf and root, with water and tine, with patience as steady as the turning of seasons. Beyond the cloister garden and the kitchen yard, tucked against the shelter of the abbey's south wall, lies the infirmary. Its roof is low and broad, built of timber darkened by age, its windows small but bright in the pale dawn. A thin line of smoke curls from the chimney, mingling with the scent of herbs that hang drying beneath the eaves. This is where the sick and weary find rest, where quiet hands and steady hearts meet pain with patient care. Inside, the long hall is warm despite the morning chill. A hearth smoulders at one end, its coals glowing faintly red. Above it, an iron pot steams with water kept hot for washing and mixing remedies. Simple beds line the walls, each with a straw mattress covered in clean linen. A few are empty, their covers folded back in readiness. Others hold sleepers who stir and sigh as the day begins. Light filters through oiled parchment panes, soft and golden. Brother Aelric, the infirmarian, enters first. He is a man of middle years, with careful hands and a face both kind and serious. A lamp swings from his belt, casting pale circles of light as he moves from bed to bed, checking each sleeper. He touches foreheads to feel for fever, adjusts blankets, and listens to the slow, even breathing of those recovering from long illness. His steps make hardly a sound on the worn boards. On a small side table stand bowls of herbs gathered yesterday, sage, chamomile, rosemary, and comfrey roots. Aelric kindles the hearth to fuller flame and adds water to the iron pot. Soon steam fills the room with its damp warmth, carrying the green, sharp scent of healing plants. He hums under his breath, no tune in particular, just a soft murmur to break the hush of early morning. A novice arrives, carrying fresh linen from the laundry. His face is sleepy but eager, his arms full of folded sheets that smell of sun and soap. Together they change the bedding of an empty cot, moving gently so as not to wake the nearest patients. Aelric teaches as he works how to smooth fabric so it does not chafe, how to tuck corners so the sick may move without strain. The boy listens, hands clumsy but improving with each task. At the farthest bed, an elderly pilgrim stirs awake. His beard is white, his skin lined by long roads and long years. Fever once burned in him, but now it has broken, leaving only weakness and a soft cough. Aelric kneels beside him, offering warm water mixed with honey and thyme. The man drinks slowly, then whispers thanks in a voice rough with travel. Aelric smiles and lays a cool hand on his shoulder before moving on. Not all here are travelers. A farmer lies near the hearth with a bandaged leg, broken by a fall from his cart. His sleep is deep, but not troubled. The bone has been set and bound with splints made in the abbey workshop. Beside him, a young mother cradles her child, who suffered fever from an autumn chill. Both are asleep now, the little one's breath soft and regular. Aelric pauses to add another log to the fire, keeping the hall warm for them. The novice begins grinding dried herbs in a small mortar, guided by the infirmarian's quiet instructions. Mint and fennel for stomach aches, willow bark for pain, sage and honey for sore throats. The sound of pestle on stone is steady and comforting, mingling with the crackle of the fire. Aelric prepares a poultice of comfrey and yarrow, spreading it carefully on clean linen to wrap the farmer's injured leg later in the morning. From outside comes the faint sound of birds in the orchard, and the distant echo of the morning bell calling the rest of the abbey to prayer. The infirmary keeps its own hours. Though Aelric bows his head briefly, he does not leave his patients. Prayer here is work itself, each touch and remedy a kind of devotion. The novice whispers a short blessing as he works, shy but sincere. After the first prayers are finished, another brother arrives carrying bread and a small pot of broth from the kitchen. Breakfast in the infirmary is simple but nourishing. Aelric thanks him quietly and sets the tray on a sideboard. Soon the smell of warm broth joins the herbs and wood smoke, filling the hall with comfort. The sick begin to stir more fully, waking to the soft light of day. Aelric helps the elderly pilgrim sit up, propping him with pillows. He feeds him a little broth, patient with each spoonful. The farmer is woken just enough to drink. The mother, too, takes a small bowl while her child dozes in her lap. There is no hurry. Healing moves at its own pace. The novice clears away empty cups and wipes hands and faces with a warm, damp cloth, gentle as rain. Once the patients are tended, Aelric turns to the day's medicines. He checks jars on the shelves, salves of beeswax and herbs, oils steeped with rosemary, dried bundles of sage and thyme. Some must be replenished. He sends the novice to the garden for fresh mint and plantain leaves, and while waiting he writes brief notes on scraps of parchment, symptoms, progress, remedies given. His handwriting is slow but careful. Records matter, though few outside these walls will ever read them. Visitors sometimes come at mid-morning. Today it is a villager bringing her father, an old man unsteady on his feet. She guides him kindly through the door, and Aelric meets them with calm welcome. He examines the man's swollen ankle, gently asking questions. A sprain, not a break. He nods and smiles reassurance. Soon the man is resting on a cot with his foot wrapped and lifted, while the daughter sighs in relief. Aelric thanks her for bringing him early rather than letting it worsen. Meanwhile, the novice returns with fresh herbs, their scent bright in the warm hall. Together they make an infusion, boiling water poured over mint and plantain, left to steep before straining into a jug. This will cool and soothe fevered throats later. They also mix honey with powdered sage for coughs. Each action is deliberate and calm, like small prayers turned physical. Light grows stronger as the sun climbs. Through the windows falls a soft gold that turns the herbs vivid and makes the white linens glow. Outside, the abbey hums with work bells, tools, distant chant from the church. Yet here type moves gently, marked only by the needs of the sick and the quiet tasks of care. Around midday, those well enough to sit are helped outside to a sheltered bench. The fresh air is sweet with apple and mint. Bees drone lazily nearby. The old pilgrim sighs in pleasure as he feels the sun. The young mother rocks her drowsy child and smiles faintly, first smile in days. The farmer dozes, legs stretched before him, soaking warmth into healing bones. Elric and the novice eat their own meal standing in the doorway, bread with a little cheese, a cup of watered ale. They speak softly, the boy asking questions about herbs, the man answering with patient care. Between bites, Elric keeps watch on his charges, eyes gentle but alert for any sign of pain or fever. In the afternoon, more small tasks fill the hours. Bandages are changed, herbs are tied to dry for winter. Salves are stirred over the hearth so wax and oil blend smoothly. Sometimes Aelric sings under his breath, a hymn learned long ago, its tune slow and comforting. The novice hums along, shy but happy. Healing here is not only about wounds and sickness, but about creating a place where peace itself helps the body mend. Now and then a harder moment comes. A man from the town is carried in with a deep cut from a woodcutter's axe. Blood has slowed but not stopped. His face is pale. Aelric acts without panic, hands firm as he cleans the wound with warm wine, stitches it with steady skill, binds it tight with linen. The novice watches wide-eyed but doesn't falter, passing thread and salve when asked. Soon the man is resting, color slowly returning. The room absorbs the moment like deep water swallowing a stone, ripples, then calm. Later, when the sun begins to lower, the day's patients are settled once more. Some sleep deeply, lulled by warmth and care. Others sit quietly, sipping infusions, watching light fade across the herb-draped rafters. The pilgrim dozes with a peaceful smile. The farmer's breathing is slow and even. The mother hums softly to her child. Evening draws near. Aelric and the novice tidy the hall, sweeping rushes, replacing water jugs, folding spare linens. The hearth is banked so it will hold heat through the night. Jars of salve and bundles of herbs are returned to shelves, labeled in careful script. The smell of mint and honey lingers sweet and clean. Before Vespers, Aelric leads a short prayer for the sick. Those awake join softly, murmuring thanks for another day of life, strength, and gentle hands. Some make the sign of the cross, others simply close their eyes. The novice listens with shining face, perhaps understanding for the first time how healing is more than remedy. It is love made patient. When the evening bell rings across the abbey, the hall grows very quiet. Patients settle into rest. The novice lowers the lanterns so shadows lengthen but comfort remains. Aelric makes one last round, touching shoulders, tucking blankets, offering a whispered blessing at each bed. Then he closes the outer door softly and walks toward the church for prayer, leaving the infirmary wrapped in warmth and night. Outside, stars begin to prick the sky. The herb garden breathes its fragrance into the cooling air. Within the little hall, the sick sleep under the care of stillness itself, safe in the heart of the abbey. Tomorrow the same gentle work will begin again, as it has for years, tending pain, offering peace, and keeping alive the quiet hope of healing. Behind the quiet stone walls of a medieval monastery, Prayer shapes each day. Bells call to matins before dawn, to lauds as light breaks, and to the steady rhythm of work and worship that fills the hours. Among cloisters and gardens, scriptoria and chapels, there is another space, quieter still yet vital to many lives, the infirmary. Here brothers tend to their own sick, and sometimes to weary travelers, combining prayer with a learned, if still simple, craft of healing. The infirmary often lies a little apart from the main cloister, to keep noise and illness from spreading. Its long, low hall smells faintly of herbs and beeswax, clean compared to much of the outside world. Sunlight filters through high, narrow windows, rushes or simple planks cover the floor, rows of beds or pallets line the walls, each with blanket of undyed wool, a stool for cup or candle, and perhaps a small crucifix above. Quiet reigns except for soft moans, murmured prayers, and the shuffle of sandaled feet. The day begins early. As bells call the community to prime, the infirmary, the monk in charge, makes rounds. He greets each patient gently, checking fever by touch, inspecting wounds, asking after sleep and appetite. Younger brothers fetch water, sweep floors, empty night pots, and refill lamps. Light floods through narrow glass as the room wakes. After prayers and simple breakfast, often broth or pottage for patients, the healer prepares medicines. Shelves hold jars and flasks labeled in careful Latin: mel honey, vinum wine, salvia sage, rosmarinus, rosemary, pulvis court, salicis, willow bark powder, pestils grind dried leaves, mortars release sharp and pleasant scents. Wine warms on brazier to sterilize wounds or mix with herbs. Beeswax melts with oil to form soothing salves. Much of this knowledge comes from books. Monks cherish herbals, manuscripts copied lovingly, sometimes with colored drawings of plants. Works like those of Dioscorides or Hildegard of Bingen teach virtues of fennel for digestion, plantain for cuts, comfrey for bones. The infirmary reads by candlelight, cross-referencing experience with scripture and ancient wisdom. In a world where few could read, this learning feels profound. Patients are mostly fellow monks, worn by fasting or long hours of writing. But outsiders sometimes appear, pilgrims with blistered feet, peasants with festering cuts, travelers sick from strange food. The monastery offers shelter and charity. A porter may bring them to infirmary door, where healer decides if they stay. Contagious illness to frighten community. Some monasteries maintain separate plague huts far beyond main walls when pestilence comes. Treatments are gentle but practical. Fever meets cool cloths and willow bark drink. Wounds are washed with wine or brine, packed with honey or herbs to prevent rot. Stomach pains eased by mint, fennel, or caraway. Coughing brothers inhale steam of thyme and rosemary. Broken bones are splinted with wood and linen. Bloodletting is practiced, though cautiously. The infirmary believes balancing humors may restore health. Enemas with mild herbs clear stubborn ailments. Always prayer accompanies psalms sung softly as medicine given. Hygiene here surpasses much of outside world. Floors swept daily, linens, though rough, kept cleaner than peasant homes. Water flows from cistern or spring. Monks wash hands before tending sick. Food for patients is mild, broth of herbs, barley gruel, soft bread dipped in wine. Silence is respected to allow rest. Compared to the noisy, smoky cottage, the infirmary feels peaceful. Gardens feed this work. Just beyond infirmary walls often lies a physic garden, beds of sage, rue, lavender, mint, wormwood, and more exotic plants brought by traveling monks. Bees hum among flowers, novices weed and water under watchful eye of senior brother who knows each root's virtue. Drying racks line cloister walks where herbs hang upside down in fragrant rows. The garden is both pharmacy and prayer, tending creation to heal creation. Seasons guide care. In spring, fresh greens cleanse winter's heaviness, coughs and fevers common from damp. Summer yields plenty of herbs and sees injuries from field labor and travel. Autumn means storing remedies, drying infusic, sealing jars against winter illness. Winter brings chills, lung fevers, and famine-weakened bodies. The infirmary grows crowded, fires burn bright, broth steams constantly. Beyond bodily care, monks minister to spirit. A sick brother receives confession and Eucharist. Psalms soothe sleepless nights. Pilgrims or peasants may be prayed over, blessed with relic if monastery has one. Belief that soul's peace aids body is strong. Healing blends medicine and faith. Life for the infirmary is steady but demanding. He studies when quiet, tends garden, copies recipes into neat Latin. He also comforts dying, holding hand, reading prayers, lighting candles so soul finds light. Some brothers spend decades here, humble and skilled, remembered more for mercy than miracle. Not all healing succeeds. Death visits often despite best efforts. Yet families and fellow monks find comfort that loved ones passed in clean, prayer-filled place, not alone on cottage floor. The infirmary, for all its limits, represents hope and dignity. Occasionally, wider world intrudes. Nobles seek monastic care, trusting learned monks over rough barbers. Soldiers wounded in skirmish may limp here. During plague years, desperate crowds beg entrance. Sometimes doors must close to save community. These crises test charity and caution, faith and fear. Chronicles note brothers who died serving sick, considered holy for their sacrifice. Night here is hushed and tender. Lamps glow faint along walls. Healer makes last rounds with quiet, sandaled step. He adjusts blanket, murmurs blessing, tastes cooling fever drink. Outside, bells mark Compline. Cloister falls silent but for night watch. Within infirmary, only crackle of brazier and sigh of sleeper's sound. It is a sanctuary within a sanctuary. So when imagining medieval medicine, remember this calm hall, herbs drying in rafters, beeswax and wine scenting air, gentle prayers mingling with practical care. The infirmary of a monastery may lack modern science, yet it gave compassion and learning to a harsh world, tending bodies and souls alike. On the first pale edge of dawn, when the road is empty but for crows and mist, a single horseman moves slowly along the rutted track. His cloak is dark with dew, his saddlebags are heavy with glass and clay, wrapped to keep from breaking on the stones. This is Master Willem, a traveling physician. He rides alone, though not in haste, following the old trade routes from town to town, bringing what learning and medicine he has gathered over many years. Willem is no courtly doctor. His beard is more silver than black, his boots patched and scuffed, his clothes plain but well kept. Yet on his belt hangs a small case of instruments wrapped in oiled leather, and his pack holds jars of dried herbs, simple tinctures, and folded papers filled with careful notes. Around his neck, tucked under his tunic, hangs a token of the university where he once studied, though few in these quiet villages know such places by name. He rides with patience, pausing often to listen to his horse's breathing or to check the straps of his saddlebags. The road is his familiar companion. Mud in spring, dust in summer, frost in winter. He knows where streams cross, where a certain willow gives shade, where a ruined wayside cross warns of bandits long gone. As the sun rises behind him, the mist lifts to reveal distant fields and the dark line of a forest ahead. By mid-morning he reaches a small hamlet. Smoke curls from low thatched roofs, hens scatter from the path as he rides in. Children stare but keep their distance, wary and curious in equal measure. A few men pause in their work, repairing a fence, to nod at him, and an old woman carrying a basket of turnips squints before breaking into a smile of recognition. Willem has come here before. His name travels faster than his horse. He dismounts at the green where a stone well stands. A young boy runs to hold the horse's reins while Willem stretches stiff legs. The boy's mother hurries after, wiping her hands on her apron, and greets the physician with shy gratitude. Word spreads quickly. The doctor is here. Soon a small knot of villagers gathers, each bringing some small ailment or worry. Willem works from his saddlebags, though he first insists on washing his hands at the well. He examines a child with a swollen ear, gently prodding and listening to the story of fever and crying nights. From a jar he takes dried chamomile and elderflower, instructing the mother to steep a strong tea and hold warm cloths to the ear until it drains. He smiles kindly at the frightened child and gives him a tiny carved bird from his pocket, a token he keeps for such moments. Next comes a man with a long-healed cut that never stopped aching. Willem unwraps the bandage and inspects the scar, rubbing gently at the edges. He recognizes a large splinter of wood beneath the skin. With steady hand and a thin blade from his leather case, he opens the wound just enough to draw the sliver free. The man winces but does not cry out. The relief is almost immediate. Willem cleans the cut with wine from a small flask and binds it fresh. An older woman complains of sleepless nights and trembling hands. Willem listens carefully, asking about her days, her griefs, her food. He gives her a vial of poppy syrup with stern instructions to use only a few drops, and a packet of lavender and balm to steep in warm water. More rest from calm than from draughts, he tells her softly, and pats her shoulder as she nods. For each service he accepts whatever the villagers can give. Some offer coins, others bring eggs, wool, or a pot of honey. Willem never asks for more than they can spare. He keeps careful account in his ledger, writing not just what he has given, but what he has learned. How this village calls plantain waybread, how fever runs through the marsh each late summer, how the well sometimes runs low in drought. By noon he has seen 12 people. The green smells of trampled grass and fresh herbs, and his hands are stained with wine and plant sap. The villagers bring him bread and ale in thanks, and he eats sitting on a low stone, speaking gently with a group of curious boys who ask about the instruments in his case. He shows them the harmless ones, a polished listening horn for the chest, a small glass to look at the eye. They gape and whisper. To them he is half healer, half magician. After eating, Willem packs his things carefully. He refills his water flask at the well and thanks the villagers for their welcome. A young man with a new baby asks him to stop by their cottage before he leaves. Willem agrees. There he checks the infant, Rosie, strong but troubled with colic. He leaves a little fennel seed and instructions for gentle belly rubs. The parents look relieved and press a loaf of warm rye bread into his hands. By my afternoon, he is back on the road. The sun is high, the dust warm beneath his horse's hooves. He hums to himself a tune picked up long ago in a distant town. The rhythm of travel is familiar, fields giving way to forest, then back to fields. At a crossroads he stops to rest beneath a wayside cross where travelers have left pebbles and bits of ribbon. He eats an apple and drinks from his flask, listening to birdsong and the rust of leaves. As he rides on, he sometimes stops to gather plants. He knows where wild yarrow grows white among the stones, where willow trees lean over a stream with bark ready for pain-relieving brews, where mint runs rampant in the ditch. Each cutting is taken with care, never too much, wrapped in damp cloth and tucked into his saddlebag. The road itself is his herb garden, wide and varied. Toward evening he reaches a market town. Its gates stand open and the square is busy with carts and livestock as traders pack up for the day. Willem heads straight to the small inn by the bridge, where he is greeted with a nod from the innkeeper, who has seen him many times before. A stable boy takes his horse. Willem loosens his pack and enters the warm room smelling of bread and beer. Inside, he is recognized at once. A miller's wife waves him over, asking about a cough that has troubled her youngest. A carpenter shows a swollen wrist. Willem promises to see them in the morning and orders a simple supper of stew and dark bread. While he eats, a few more townsfolk approach quietly with questions. He listens but asks them to wait until daylight. He knows the value of rest both for himself and for careful judgment. Later he retires to a small rented room above the inn. By the light of a single candle he cleans his instruments, boiling the small blades in a pot he carries for that purpose, and wiping each glass vial. He writes notes in his ledger, what he gave today, what he saw, where supplies grow thin. He marks which tinctures need brewing and which herbs to seek tomorrow. The work is silent but steady, a kind of prayer for those he has helped and those he will meet yet. Outside, the town slows toward night. Carts creak home, lanterns bloom along the streets. The window of Willem's room overlooks the river bridge, where water glints faintly in the last light. He leans on the sill a moment, breathing the cool air and listening to a distant song from the tavern. Then he shutters the window and lies down on the narrow bed, his pack close at hand. Sleep comes easily, though he dreams lightly, Faces he has seen, voices asking for help, the rustle of leaves where herbs grow. It is this a burden but a calling, and he wakes with calm heart when the first cock crows. Morning in the market town begins with bells and clatter. Willem rises, washes quickly, and breaks his fast on bread and cheese. Then he walks to the square where a bench has been set for him. Soon the townsfolk gather, those who came last night and new ones who heard. He listens, examines, prescribes warm compresses, herb infusions, careful binding of wounds. Sometimes he must say what they fear, that a sickness runs too deep for his craft. But be then he gives comfort, teaching how to ease pain and keep fevered loved ones cool and clean. The day unfolds as the last did. Steady work, quiet gratitude. A merchant gives him a pouch of dried figs. A girl presents a posy of flowers shyly after he eases her mother's cough. Willem never stays more than a day or two. There are many roads, and he is needed elsewhere, but he leaves each place a little better than he found it, and each place remembers. By late afternoon, his pack is lighter in herbs but heavier with gifts. He fills his water at the inn's well, thanks the keeper, and mounts his horse once more. The road stretches ahead, familiar and inviting. Behind him, the town settles back into its own rhythm, speaking softly of the physician who came and went. As dusk gathers, Willem rides into the edge of forest where birds sing their last and fireflies begin to wake. He thinks of the people he has met, the frightened child, the weary mother, the farmer with the splinter. He thinks of the long miles yet to go and the many unknown doors he will knock upon. His heart is calm. The road is long, but it is good. He stops for the night at a wayside chapel, tethering his horse and lighting a small fire. From his pack he takes bread, cheese, and a little dried apple. He eats simply, listening to the night, the rustle of leaves, a stream gurgling somewhere unseen. Before sleep he kneels, offering a quiet prayer for those he has treated and those he could not heal. Then he lies down beneath the stars with his cloak wrapped close, his instruments tucked beside him like trusted friends. The morning will come again, and with it more miles, more faces, more small battles with pain and sickness. Master Willem will ride on, bringing what skill he has and learning what the road will teach. His work is it grand, but it is steady and kind, and it weaves a fragile net of care across the wide medieval world, one patient, one village, one quiet remedy at a time. At the edge of the market quarter, just beyond the noisy tanners and the row of bakers' ovens, stands a timbered house with steam drifting from its roof. A wooden sign hangs above the door, carved with a bucket and a sprig of rosemary. Beneath it, a small bench holds bundles of fresh rushes and birch twigs. This is the Bathhouse, a place where weary townsfolk come to wash away the dust of labor and find an hour of warmth and ease. The day begins early here. Before dawn, Marta the keeper and her son Tom sweep the stone floors and rake out yesterday's ashes from the great brick stoves. The bathhouse smells of damp wood and old steam, cool in the morning before the fires are lit. Tom hauls in armfuls of birch logs, while Marta sets copper kettles to fill with well water. She moves with practiced economy, tying back her hair and humming softly under her breath. By the time the sun rises over the rooftops, the stoves are crackling. Huge clay vessels begin to hiss as water warms. The heat creeps into the room slowly, fogging the small windows and make the timbers smell rich and resinous. Herbs hang from the rafters, rosemary, lavender, thyme. Their scent grows stronger as the air warms, promising comfort to those who will step inside. The bathhouse has 3 main rooms. The first is the outer chamber where visitors undress and leave their shoes and cloaks. Benches run along the walls, and pegs hold linen towels. The second is the warm room, heated but not stifling, where people sit to accustom themselves and talk softly. Beyond it lies the hot room, lined with smooth benches and fed by the brick stoves. Here steam billows and the air grows thick with moisture and herbs. In one corner stands a great copper cauldron, from which hot water is ladled to mix with cooler well water for washing. Marta keeps the place clean and orderly. She scrubs the benches with lye water, sprinkles fresh rushes on the floors, and checks the stoves so the heat rises steadily. Tom runs back and forth, carrying pails of water, feeding the fires, and setting out wooden buckets for guests. The work is hot and damp, but the boy is cheerful, proud to help his mother run a house so many rely on. By mid-morning, the first visitors arrive, 2 weavers with hands stained from the dye vats, their faces tired but friendly. They pay Marta a copper each and slip into the outer room, hanging their cloaks. Soon laughter drifts from the warm room as they stretch sore shoulders and talk of the week's work. One dips a bundle of birch twigs into a basin, preparing to swish the fragrant branches in the hot air later to soothe muscles and drive sweat. A merchant follows, dusty from the road. He tips Marta well for a private corner and sighs as the steam wraps him, loosening the ache of travel. Behind him come 2 apprentices with hair still full of sawdust. They grin shyly at Tom as they settle on the benches. The bathhouse fills gradually, never crowded but always lively, a hum of low conversation mingling with the hiss of water and the crack of stoves. Here news flows as easily as sweat. Men and women speak of grain prices, of the new toll on the bridge, of rumors from distant towns. Laughter breaks out when someone tells a story of a stubborn mule or a drunken minstrel. Children sometimes come with parents, splashing in the corner basins while their elders soak. The bathhouse is more than cleanliness. It is a hearth for the body and the spirit, a gathering place as warm as the fire itself. Marta moves quietly among the guests, offering ladles of hot water or small bundles of herbs for aching joints. She is no physician, but long years have taught her much: a little mint to clear the head, rosemary to wake tired blood, lavender to calm fretful hearts. She keeps a crock of salt for scrubbing skin and a pot of goose grease mixed with thyme to rub into cracked hands. Those who can pay leave coins. Those who cannot are rarely turned away if their need is great. Occasionally, the bathhouse hosts special visitors. Today, a night squire arrives, leading a weary man-at-arms with a bandaged shoulder. Marta frowns but ushers them in. The wound is clean but stiff. The man has ridden long miles since it was dressed. Marta warms a cloth steeped in rosemary and sage, pressing it gently to the scar. The heat and scent loosen the tightness, and soon the soldier sighs in relief, sinking into the steam with eyes closed. Meanwhile, Tom helps a bent old cooper wash his back, laughing at the man's dry jokes. The cooper tells him how barrel hoops must be hammered just so or they spring apart, and Tom listens wide-eyed while wringing out a sponge. In this place, craft and care mingle. People teach each other small things, even while they rest. Midday brings more customers, market women with baskets empty of cabbages and fish, tired but merry after their sales. A pair of shepherds smelling of lanolin and grass. A baker with arms strong from kneading dough since before dawn. The air grows heavy with steam and scent. Windows drip with condensation. The heat seeps into every bone. People sweat and scrub, then rinse with cool water drawn from a well-fed cistern in the corner. Children squeal at the sudden chill, then dive back into the warm mist. Friends help one another wash hair or rub tired shoulders. Sometimes someone breaks into song, an old harvest tune or a hymn, and the whole room hums along. The steam carries sound strangely, softening it, make it rich and low. At one side stands a shallow pool fed by a small pipe from the cauldron. Marta keeps it at a pleasant warmth. Those too weak to sit long in the hot benches, elders, the ill, new mothers, bathe here gently, supported by friends or by Marta herself. She has seen lives begin and end in this room, infants' first baths, old men's last washing before death. She treats each moment with quiet respect. In the afternoon, the bathhouse slows. The merchant has gone, fresh-faced and lighter of step. The weavers leave laughing, hair damp and clean. Marta and Tom sweep the floors, change out buckets, and stoke the fires anew. Sometimes they boil fresh herbs into the cauldron, so the steam renews its scent. Today it is rosemary and thyme, sharp and clean. As the day cools toward evening, more townsfolk arrive after their labors. Smiths with soot still in their hair, washerwomen weary from the riverbank, scribes blinking from long hours over parchment. The hot room glows with lamplight now, shadows dancing on wet walls. Steam swirls gold in the lantern beams, and voices grow softer, more reflective as night approaches. Marta sometimes listens to these evening talks. Men speak of hopes for good harvest. Women share news of betrothals. Apprentices dream aloud of masterhood. Worries about illness or hunger surface too. But here in the heat and quiet, they feel lighter, shared among neighbors. The bathhouse is a place where burdens slip away with the sweat. Tom, still young, loves this tie best. He sits near the stove, feeding it slowly, and watches faces ease and eyes grow clear. He has learned more of people here than anywhere else. Who is kind, who is lonely, who hides sorrow behind loud laughter. He knows, though his mother rarely says it, that warmth and clean water to heal hearts as surely as herbs heal wounds. Sometimes, after the guests have gone, Marta herself sits for a while in the quiet steam. She loosens the scarf from her hair, dips a cloth into the cooling water, and washes the sweat and soot from her own skin. Tom helps her, solemn and gentle, proud to return the care she gives all day. They speak little, but their silence is warm. At closing, the fires are banked but not dead. The cauldrons are left half full to stay warm through the night. The floors are rinsed with buckets of clean water. Benches are scrubbed with lye and herbs so tomorrow will smell fresh. Herbs used up during the day are replaced. New bundles hung to dry, fresh mint and rosemary set by the stove. Before they leave, Marta lights a single lantern and hangs it by the door. It will burn through the night, a sign that those in sudden need, midwives, travelers, or the sick, may knock and be received. She has learned that comfort cannot keep strict hours. Sometimes in the dark a stranger arrives, a fevered child, a farmer burned by his own forge, a woman near to birth. The bathhouse becomes a refuge then, its warmth a mercy. When the door is finally shut and bolted, Marta and Tom walk home under the stars. The night smells of cooling stone and faint herbs. Tom carries a bundle of birch twigs for tomorrow. Marta holds the day's small earnings in a leather purse. They speak softly of who came and who may return, of what herbs to gather, of which stove brick needs mending. Their cottage is it far, and soon the quiet of night enfolds them. They sleep deeply, weary but content. Tomorrow the fires will wake again, and the bathhouse will fill with steam and laughter and the smell of herbs. It will cleanse more than skin. It will soothe the tired spirit of the town. One bucket, one song, one gentle hour at a time. On a lane not far from the market, where the tanner's quarter yields to quieter houses, hangs a painted pole of red and white, with a twist of blue ribbon that flutters when the wind turns the corner. Beneath it a narrow door opens onto a room smelling of soap, warmed wine, and clean wood. The signboard creaks softly, and within lamplight falls across polished basins and a great chair set near the hearth. Here Master Jehan, barber and surgeon, keeps his shop and his careful hours. Morning comes early to this place. Before the bells for prime, Jehan sweeps rushes from the floor and lays down fresh, their scent bright as a field after rain. He wipes his razors on a cloth and sets them in order, blades shining like thin crescents. On a shelf he arranges jars of salves and simples, honey thick as amber, vinegar sharp as apples, goose grease shining pale, wine dark and patient in a stoppered flask. Everything has its place. The room holds a hush that honors work done with steady hands. A small brazier glows on the hearthstone, its coals raked dean. Beside it stands a kettle in which Jahan will warm water for washing and for the steeping of herbs. A row of cups hangs along a beam, cupping glasses in different sizes, their rims smoothed by long use. Above them, wrapped in linen, lie rolls of bandage cut from old shirts and boiled clean. There are leeches, too, kept in a jar of pond water dark as tea, moving slowly like commas that have forgotten their place in a sentence. Jehan himself is a compact man with thoughtful eyes. His beard is clipped short and neat, his hair close-cropped in the manner of his craft. Around his waist hangs a belt with pouches for needles and lengths of fine gut, a hook for forceps, and a small pouch of waxed thread. When he works at hair and beard, his hands move smooth as river water. When he turns to bones and wounds, the same hands become rock-steady, the calm of long practice guiding every motion. The first visitor is always old Pierre from the baker's row, who likes his face shaved before the oven grows hot. He settles into the great chair with a sigh, and Jehan lays a warm linen over his chin. The razor glides with a soft whisper, the scent of soap and rosemary filling the air. They speak little, a word about the weather, a question about the price of grain, a blessing for steady hands. Pierre rises smoother of cheek and lighter of step, leaving 2 small coins and a grateful nod. After him come 2 apprentices from the dyer's hall, faces stained faintly blue at the edge of their hair. Jehan trims their locks and sets a comb's neat path through the crown, then dabs their ears with vinegar to chase the itch of dye and heat. He laughs softly when they boast of their master's skill, then sends them out looking sharper than they came, their pride mended with their hair. The pole outside turns lazily, marking the door as the place where edges are kept true. Not all who come seek a barber's work. A mother enters carrying a boy whose ankle swelled after a tumble from a cart. Jehan lifts the child gently and seats him where the light is kind. He presses with firm but careful fingers, feeling the bone's tail beneath skin. A sprain, not a break. He warms strips of cloth, soaks them in wine, and wraps the limb with patient spirals, explaining how to rest it, how to walk as if the earth itself were tender. The boy's tears lessen, the mother's shoulders ease. When the door closes again, Jehan cleans the chair and the cloths, humming a psalm he learned years ago while apprenticed to a grim old master who believed music steadied the hands. He draws a comb through his own hair as he waits, glancing to be sure the jars are corked and the knives set back in their appointed grooves. Outside, the lane wakes to cartwheels and gossip, but the shop keeps its tempered quiet, a harbor for work that needs attention more than noise. Near mid-morning, the guild beadles stop by on their rounds. They have come to hear that Jehan accepts Saturday afternoon for bloodletting, and not on feast days, and that he keeps his basin rims smooth, his leeches sound. Jehan shows them his ledger, lines neat as stitches, who came, what was done, what herbs and draughts were given. They nod at the order and share a news crumb about a new boy at the barber's bench in the next parish, who cut too close and learned a sharp lesson from his master. Such is the way of craft. The hand must learn truth from the steel. Bloodletting is taken with seriousness here. Jehan has charts inked by a steady scribe, lines of the body and the hours when certain veins open to remedy a humor grown too bold. When a weaver arrives complaining of thick head and ringing ears, Jehan does not reach first for the lancet. He asks of sleep and food, of wine and weather, of grief. Only then does he tie a soft cord at the elbow and reveal the shallow blue thread that will give a little relief. With a small prick and a basin ready, the dark-eyed answers. The weaver watches without bravado, then breathes easier when the bandage is tied. Jehan knows the weight of superstition and the comfort of habit. He keeps, at the back of the shop, a glass flask for urine, faintly golden in the light. Now and then a worried wife brings such a sample, and he lifts it to the window, turns it with slow fingers, looks for cloud or sediment, breathes an inch from the rim. He cannot promise more than skill and care, but people take ease in signs read by one who reads them daily. He gives counsel mild and plain broth, rest, a little mint, and does not let pride outrun what he has learned. Just before noon, a teamster comes stooped and tight across the shoulders. Jehan seats him on a low stool and brings down the cupping glasses. He warms the air inside with a quick pass over the flame, sets the glass to skin, and the flesh rises gently beneath as if answering a soft question. The teamster sighs, eyes closing, while the cups draw heat and ache from muscle to surface. After a time, Jehan lifts them, rubs rosemary oil into the loosened knots, and the man stands straighter, amazed by how the world's weight has lightened. A toothache follows, borne by a young woman with one cheek round as a plum. Jehan sits her where the light is best, and probes with a slender iron, gentle, listening to the hiss between her teeth. The tooth is rotten. It will not mend by prayer or poultice. He speaks quietly to her, offers a mouthful of warmed wine, and shows the iron forceps. No surprise, no trickery. When she nods, he holds fast and draws with a firm, clean motion. There is a brief cry, a soft word, a cloth pressed to the wound, then relief. He gives her sage leaves to chew and a little honey to sweeten the courage she has spent. Between such callings, Jehan is still a barber. A merchant with silvered hair arrives with news of river tolls and sits for a careful trim. Jehan shapes the beard as if sculpting a hedge, revealing the angle of the jaw, the line of age that keeps its own dignity. The merchant speaks of winter woolens and rumor of a far court's war. Jehan listens and answers in a manner that neither invites nor rebuffs, his attention folded mostly into the clean fall of hair and the neat snap of thread when a long whisker resists. On a peg by the door hangs a worn apron small enough for a child. It belonged to Jehan's first apprentice, gone now to a town upriver where he has his own pole and basin and the same neat habit of writing down what is done. Jehan's new boy, Colin, is quieter. He keeps the kettle filled, the cloths boiled, the floor clean as a plate. His eye is good, his courage slow to rise, which Jehan counts a virtue. Better a cautious hand than a bold one that cannot feel a tremor in a blade. At noon they break bread in the back room. Jehan pours watered wine and shares a heel of rye and a wedge of cheese wrapped in cloth. He teaches without ceremony, describing how to feel a fracture's edge, how to listen to a fever without being fooled by sweat. He shows the apprentice how a razor must be stropped on leather until it sings a little when drawn through hair, and how a lancet's point must be neither needle slim nor blunt as a nail. These small songs of the trade, once learned, never leave the hand. Afternoon brings a farmer with a split palm from a stubborn gate. Jehan washes the cut with warmed wine as he was taught, and draws the edges together with 3 neat stitches of gut, each knot tied flat like a sleeping snail that will not catch on cloth. He lays a salve of honey and vinegar and binds the hand with linen, instructing the man to keep it dry, though the work of mending fences calls. The farmer nods, grave as a field stone, and leaves the price in grain to be milled and collected later. Then comes a harder task. A boy from the mill with a thumb crushed under a wheel lever, the nail is gone, the flesh torn. Jehan breathes once and sets the room in order with quiet words. He sends the apprentice to stir the brazier until the iron is ready, not for burning, but to frighten corruption with heat if it dares come. He cleans the wound with the patience of rain, hushed and thorough, laying plantain leaf to soothe, setting a new bed of waxed cloth to shield the tender place where a nail may grow again. The boy's breath hitches and steadies under his words. Courage, like cloth, can be held at the edges when the middle frays. A potter steps in with a shoulder that will not lift, Jahan prods, finds the shifted joint, and lays the man along the bench. He loops a strap around the wrist, asks the apprentice to hold, and with a firm, smooth pull, sets the bone back into its nest. The sound is soft but sure. The potter gasps, then laughs, helpless laugh of pain, leaving like a bird flushing from grass. Jahan binds the arm close to the body and counsels rest. The wheel can wait a few days for the sake of a lifetime's work. When the light in the window begins to honey, a friar from the nearby convent arrives with a basket of herbs from their physic garden: yarrow, rue, comfrey root, and a handful of lavender bound with blue thread. They trade knowledge in the quiet way of those who work close to pain. The friar speaks of an old woman eased by mint water and prayer. Jehan speaks of a child's fever that broke at dawn with cool cloths and steady watching. Neither claims more than can be claimed, and each thanks the other for the share. Sometimes there is sorrow. Near Vespers, 2 men carry in a wounded stranger found by the bridge, a cut high at the ribs, blood dried and black at its edge. Jahan's face gentles as if to make a cushion from his skin. He washes the wound, whispers to the stranger, though the man cannot answer, and keeps his hands slow when quickness would tempt less careful hearts. He packs the cut with clean cloth and honey, binds, warms, and prays a simple prayer. If life stays, it stays. If not, the man will not leave the world untended. When the door closes on such cases, Jehan sits a moment on the stool by the hearth and looks at his hands. They are good hands, lined with use, nicked in small places where a blade or a bone protested. He rubs beeswax into the skin and flexes the fingers, feeling strength return like warmth to a stone. He does not boast, and he does not despair. His craft walks a narrow path between those 2 ditches, and he loves it for that discipline. As dusk deepens, barber's work returns. 4 young men crowd in together for festival trims. The room fills with laughter and thin boasting that any razor can cut through. Jehan sets them one by one in the chair, and the shears snick and sing, hair falling like late hay. He smooths a stubborn cowlick with a drop of oil, and sets a neat beard with 2 careful strokes that draw a chorus of admiring noises. They leave smelling of rosemary and lye, slapping one another's shoulders, their pockets lighter, their chins braver. The last hour before closing is for tidying and for those who need quiet help. A seamstress arrives with eyes shadowed by long nights at the candle. Jehan bathes her hands in warm water steeped with lavender, rubs balm into the tight cords at wrist and thumb, and trims the tiny burrs from nails that need to catch thread and not skin. He gives her a small pot of goose grease and thyme to carry home, and a counsel to close her eyes between seams when the bell at the tower tells the hour. She smiles and promises as much as work will allow. Colin, sweeping, finds a single grey hair curled like a question near the chair's foot. He holds it to the light and grins. Jahan shakes his head, amused, and points the boy to stow the cups and change the rushes. The leeches are fed a little, and the jar refreshed with cool water from the bucket. Razors are wiped and set by for honing in the morning, each returned to its fitting slot with the respect one gives tools that earn a livelihood. Jehan writes the day into his ledger. He notes the weaver's leading, the farmer's hand, the millboy's thumb, the stranger at the bridge. He writes a small circle beside the last. his mark for watchfulness in the night. He counts his coins, some bright, some dull, a few clipped where they should not be, and sets aside a part for oil and soap, a part for cloth, a part for the poor in coin or in stubs of candle against winter's long evenings. Before he bars the door, the midwife knocks softly and slips in. She needs a knife honed fine and a packet of thread waxed smooth. Jehan does this without question. They share a few words about a birth expected soon and the grandmother's old remedies with fennel and caraway. Work meets work in such quiet exchanges, and the town is made safer by their overlapping care. Night gathers. Jehan banks the brazier and lifts the basin to hang dry. He takes down the pole's ribbon and smooths it, replacing it fresh for morning. The shop smells now of soap and a fading sweetness of warmed wine. The day's sharper scents have flown out the window with the last light. He places a clean cloth over the great chair, as one might set a cover over a sleeping child. The room, emptied of voices, keeps the memory of them like warmth held in brick. He steps outside with his broom and sweeps the threshold, sending a day's worth of hair into the gutter where it will drift along the lane like little mosses. The sign-pole ticks once in a stray breeze. Down the street, the candlemaker's window glows. Up the other way, the bell tower waits for curfew. Jehan stands a moment, hands on hips, and lets the town's evening rest on him. He has shaved faces and calmed pains, set a joint and lifted a weight from a teamster's shoulders. It is enough. When the curfew bell speaks, he answers by bar and latch. Inside again, he strikes his small lamp and carries it through the room, touching each shelf with his gaze. Cups, salves, cloths, blades, leeches drowsing in their dark jar. The humble miracles of the trade sit ready for tomorrow. He lowers the lamp's flame, breathes a good night to the room without knowing he has spoken, and slips into the lane where the night smells of river and cool stone. In the dark, the pole is only shadow and the painted stripes are stories held within wood. But the town knows the door, and those in need will find it when morning wakes. Jehan walks home with steady steps, hands clean, heart quiet. The day's work settles behind him like a cloak, and the promise of tomorrow's careful labor warms like banked coals. The Barber-Surgeon's shop sleeps, its instruments ordered, its basin shining in the lamplight's last breath, ready to greet whatever faces and ailments the town will bring with the dawn. The field beyond the low hills is quiet now, though yesterday it shook with noise. Spears clashed, hooves thundered, voices cried out in anger and fear. Today the only sound is the soft rustle of crows and the faint wind moving through trampled grass. Smoke drifts from scattered fires where armorers and helpers search for what could be salvaged. Among them moves a different company, healers and their assistants, gathering the wounded and tending the living where they have fallen. Sister Agnes walks carefully, skirts pinned high to keep free of mud. She is its young, yet she moves with steady strength. A simple wooden cross hangs at her neck, darkened by years of use. In one hand she carries a basket lined with clean cloths. The other steadies a small pot of wine for washing wounds. Around her trail 2 novices with bundles of bandages and a boy leading a donkey that bears sacks of herbs and water. They walk softly among the fallen, whispering prayers for those beyond help, and bending to aid those who yet breathe. Near a shattered wagon lies a soldier clutching his thigh, blood seeping through a rough bandage. Agnes kneels at once, speaking low and calm. She cuts away the makeshift cloth, pours wine to clean the gash, and packs it with moss steeped in sage and honey. The man winces but does not cry out. She praises his courage, then binds the wound tightly with fresh linen. "You will walk again," she tells him, and he nods, eyes wet with relief. All around, others labor. A lay brother splints a broken arm with willow slats padded by wool. A village girl wipes sweat from a wounded knight's brow. An old healer crushes plantain leaves underfoot to make a quick poultice for shallow cuts. The work is quiet but urgent, a rhythm learned through many campaigns. Clean, bind, comfort, move on. When enough of the injured can be moved, they are taken to the great barn near the Abbey Road. Its wide doors stand open, and within it has been transformed, straw spread thick on the floor, benches set as low pallets, lanterns hung from beams to chase the dark. The air smells of hay, smoke, and sharp herbs. Here the true work of healing begins. Agnes helps lift the soldier she tended onto a pallet near the door, where light is good. She speaks a brief blessing, then turns to the next. A boy hardly 16, pale and shivering from loss of blood. She presses linen to the wound, bidding the novice to fetch hot water. When it comes, she cleans carefully, removes an arrowhead with hands that do not tremble, and wraps the limb in layers of clean cloth. The boy breathes easier, clutching a wooden cross she slips into his hand. At the far end of the barn, a fire burns low, heating cauldrons of water. Helpers stir herbs into the steam, yarrow for bleeding, rosemary for strength, lavender to calm. The warm, scented air eases the sharp tang of blood. Pails of water mixed with wine are passed down the rows for cleansing wounds. Each pallet becomes a small island of care in the wide, dim hall. Supplies are precious. Bandages must be washed and boiled for reuse. Moss gathered from forest rocks serves when linen runs short. Honey is spread on angry cuts to fight rot. Fat mixed with herbs keeps skin from splitting. The healers know every trick the land offers. Some patients moan in fever, some sleep deeply, some stare at the rafters with silent tears. Agnes moves from one to the next, touching, murmuring, binding, never rushing, though the need is endless. Food is simple but steady. Novices carry bowls of broth barley simmered with herbs and bits of meat from animals slaughtered to feed the camp. Those able to sit are helped to eat. Those too weak are spoon-fed gently. Warmth and nourishment are as vital as salve and stitches. Many men weep when kindness comes after battle's terror. Agnes says little, but her quiet presence speaks enough. Night falls and the barn glows with lantern light. Outside, the wind carries the smell of rain and distant fires dying on the field. Inside, healers keep vigil. Some pray softly, others sing low to soothe the restless. A novice hums a cradle song as he washes a man's wounded hand. Now and then a cry breaks the stillness as pain flares. It is met with calm, with fur hands and murmured reassurance. Not all can be saved. When breath falters and the body grows cold, the sisters and brothers gather. They cross the hands of the dying, whisper prayers, and place a sprig of rosemary on the breast. Death here is met with dignity. No one is left alone. The living see this and draw strength from knowing they too will be cared for, whatever comes. Toward midnight, the work slows, the worst bleeding is stanched, the fevers watched. The barn settles into a hush broken only by low moans and the crackle of the fire. Agnes sits for a moment on a stool, rolling her shoulders. She sips a little broth herself, eyes half closed, then rises again to check bandages. Weariness is heavy, but there is no choice. The wounded depend on her steadiness. Outside, rain begins to fall. It patters on the barn roof, soft and steady, washing the field beyond. The sound brings a kind of peace. Some soldiers sleep for the first time since the fight. Others lie awake but calmer, listening. Agnes moves among them with lantern raised, a quiet figure of mercy in the flickering light. When dawn returns, pale and wet, new help arrives from the abbey. More brothers, fresh linens, and baskets of herbs. Warm bread and weak ale are brought too, lifting spirits. The healers wash their hands and faces, then begin again with the morning light, changing bandages, bathing wounds, helping the strongest to stand and stretch. Slowly, life pushes back against the night's suffering. A young man with a stitched arm manages a shaky smile when given bread. The boy Agnes tended sits up to drink broth, color returning to his cheeks. Outside, carts wait to carry those able to travel to homes or to safer lodgings. The barn fills with small signs of hope, laughter here, quiet talk there, the smell of fresh bread overtaking blood. Yet the work is it done. Some will stay for weeks, bones knitting, fevers burning away. Agnes sets aside a corner of the barn for long recovery, laying clean straw and hanging herbs overhead to sweeten the air. She speaks to each patient, explaining what healing will require: patience, stillness, food when it can be had. She tells stories of others who mended after worse, giving hope where skill alone cannot. As the sun climbs, the field outside is nearly empty of the fallen. Those beyond help have been borne away for burial. Those alive have found care. The healers step outside one by one, breathing fresh air heavy with rain and spring earth. Agnes closes her eyes a moment, lifting her face to the weak sun. She does not rejoice, too much loss remains, but she allows herself a quiet pride in the lives saved. In the days that follow, the barn becomes a ward of slow recovery. Sisters bring broth and bread each dawn. Brothers brew strong teas and salves. Children from the village carry fresh rushes and clean water. Each day more men rise and limp outside into the light. They sit on benches to feel sun on their faces, speaking softly, no longer enemies, but simply survivors. Stories emerge of bravery, of fear, of strange luck. The wounded share them over cups of mint tea, binding wounds of the heart even as the body heals. Agnes listens but does not pry. She knows talk itself is medicine. She teaches those able to walk how to help with small tasks, holding basins, stirring broth, fetching water, so they feel life returning to their hands. Weeks later, when the last are well enough to leave, the barn is swept and aired. The straw is burned, the herbs replenished. The healers clean their tools and mend their cloaks. Agnes walks the field once more, now green again with spring growth, and prays quietly for the dead. Her hands are stained, her back aches, but her heart is steady. Such work leaves no great monuments. There will be no songs for those who bandaged wounds and soothed pain. Yet every life saved, every fever broken, every soldier who returns to family whole because of this care is a quiet triumph. Agnes knows this as she shoulders the basket and turns toward the Abbey Road, ready to answer the next call. The world will fight again, she knows. Men will bleed and cry and die. But there will also be healers, silent, steadfast, who bring water, herbs, and mercy. And though no banner is raised for them, they hold the fragile thread of hope that keeps the dark from claiming all. Few shadows fell darker across the Middle Ages than the years when plague came. People called it the Great Mortality, the pestilence, the Black Death. Yet though fear stalked every road, life still flickered. Priests prayed, healers worked, families clung to hope. To walk through those years is to feel both terror and stubborn resilience. It often began quietly. A rumor from far port, sickness among sailors, deaths too swift to count. Merchants brought tales of strange swellings and fevers. Then one day a wagon arrived with linen to sell, or a pilgrim stopped for bread, and within a week villagers fell ill. Buboes swelled in armpits or groin, fever burned, black spots marred skin. Some died in days, others lingered in agony. Fear spread faster than disease. Bells tolled constantly, streets emptied, families shut doors, hoping to keep death out. In towns, carts creaked by each morning to collect the dead, their drivers crying warnings so the living could hide. Churchyards filled until no ground remained, mass graves yawned open, lime scattered over bodies. The smell of death hung heavy. Medicine struggled. Physicians wore long robes and sometimes strange bird-like masks stuffed with herbs to guard against foul air. They burned incense, bled patients to balance humors, or prescribed theriac complex spice mixture if one could pay. Most cures failed, yet people still sought help. Village healers brewed sage and vinegar, monks prayed and offered simples, mothers wiped brows with honey water. Faith both wavered and deepened. Some believed plague punishment for sin. Processions wound through streets with prayers and chants. Others fled cities to country manors or remote huts, praying to saints for protection. Relics traveled from shrine to shrine, borne by desperate clergy. Some joined flagellants, groups who whipped themselves to beg God's mercy. Yet priests also died in great numbers, staying to anoint the sick. Quiet heroism glimmered amid despair. Society strained, markets emptied, fields went untilled, when whole households perished. Lords lost tenants, cities lost craftsmen. Some survivors grew suddenly wealthy, inheriting lands or goods. Others starved with no one left to help. Fear of strangers rose, villages blocked roads, forbidding entry. Trade faltered, gossip filled void. Jews blamed and cruelly persecuted, foreigners shunned, witches feared. Yet human bonds endured. Neighbors sometimes broke quarantine to bring water to dying friend. Monks and nuns tended sick until they too fell. Parents sat with fevered children, though they knew risk. Burials, though hurried, often still held whispered prayers, small candles, handfuls of earth blessed. Bells rang for souls when no priest remained. Daily life twisted but did not vanish. Bakers still rose to knead, smiths still mended, shepherds still led flocks when able. Survivors adapted, masks of herbs, fires to cleanse air, vinegar-soaked sponges to breathe through. Some painted crosses on doors, hoping plague would pass. Villages made pacts to guard each other, sending healthy few for supplies while rest stayed isolated. Hope took strange shapes. Charms of Saint Roch or Saint Sebastian hung on walls. Processions carried images through empty streets. Children sang snatches of prayer-turned rhyme. Travelers left coins in vinegar at tolls, believing it purified payment. When plague eased, whole communities held Thanksgiving feasts and built chapels to commemorate deliverance. Landscape changed, abandoned fields turned wild, silent hamlets crumbled. Wolves and deer roamed closer to towns. Yet new growth followed. Survivors took over rich lands, wages rose where labor was scarce, guilds opened to newcomers. Sorrow birthed change, though slowly and unevenly. Art and memory marked the tide. Wall paintings showed dancing macabre, skeletons leading rich and poor alike in grim dance. Writers recorded visions of death and survival. Bells cast in plague years bore inscriptions of prayer. Future generations walked past shrines built by thankful ancestors. Even in worst moments, resilience persisted. Fields were sown again when pestilence waned. Children born after grew strong. Healers learned slowly that clean air and quarantine helped. Monks replanted physic gardens. Life refused to yield entirely. Night during plague was uncanny. Silence broken only by distant cough, cry of grief, or slow creak of death cart. Yet candles burned in windows for the sick. Prayers whispered through shutter cracks. Stars shone indifferent yet somehow comforting. Survivors woke each morning unsure if breath would last, yet they rose, tended fires, fed animals, prayed. So remember the Middle Ages not only for castles and crafts, but for this immense trial and endurance. The plague years were dark beyond measure, but within them beat hearts stubborn to live and care. In lonely cottages, monastery infirmaries, and emptied towns, compassion held a fragile, flickering light that refused to go out. Step outside the smoky warmth of a medieval kitchen, and you meet a space as vital as the hearth itself, the cottage garden. Modest in size, fenced with woven willow or rough stone, it was not a place of idle beauty, but of life and survival. Here grew the greens for the pot, the herbs for healing, the dye plants for cloth, and the flowers that whispered both faith and hope. Most peasant gardens lay close to house, safe from wandering animals. A low wattle fence kept out geese and pigs. Sometimes hawthorn hedge or simple ditch marked boundary. Inside, soil turned dark from years of compost and ash. Beds raised or edged with stones, narrow paths trodden by bare or booted feet. A few fruit trees leaned over, apple, pear, or plum, and bees hummed among blossoms. Work began as soon as earth softened in spring. Household gathered with spade or fork, children fetched water, women planned plots. Crops were practical, cabbage and kale hardy through cold, onions, leeks, garlic for flavor and strength, beans and peas climbing poles, turnips and parsnips fattening below ground. In warmer corners, lettuce or spinach for quick early greens, herbs lined edges, sage, thyme, parsley, dill, savory, and fennel waving feathery in breeze. The garden was medicine chest too, yarrow for wounds, mint for stomachs, valerian to soothe sleep, feverfew for headaches. Wise women knew when to harvest, morning for mint's sharp oil, noon for chamomile's calm. Flowers like marigold brightened pottage but also healed skin. Roses offered hips for winter syrup rich in strength. Even weeds held uses. Nettles cooked as spring tonic, plantain to cool bites. Color came not from wealth but necessity. Woad grew blue for dyeing homespun, madder gave red roots, weld offered yellow. Women cut and steeped these to tint yarn, flax sometimes grew for linen, tall stalks rippling, nothing planted without purpose, though beauty often followed purpose. Chickens scratched nearby, a goat might graze tethered at manure, compost heaps steamed gently, straw kitchen scraps and droppings rotting into soil food, rain barrels caught roof runoff in drought, buckets hauled from well, watering done by hand, slow and precious. Seasons guided every act, spring sowing and first harvest of herbs, quick salads of young leaves, summer abundance, weeding staking beans, drying and hanging herbs under eaves, autumn, storing cabbages buried in cool pits, onions braided and hung, apples packed in straw, herbs tied in bunches near hearth. Winter, gardens slept under frost, but still gave leeks, kale, and buried roots. Children played and worked here alike. They chased butterflies, scared birds, fetched snails to feed chickens, learned plant names by mother's side. Old men told tales leaning on spades. Neighbors paused to share seed or news. A garden was small but social, a quiet commons of knowledge and help. Faith watched over beds, crosses or saint images sometimes tucked in corners, holy water sprinkled at planting, prayers whispered for rain or sun. On certain feast days, herbs blessed and hung to protect home from lightning or sickness. The garden felt both earthly and sacred, a place where God's gifts and human toil met. Pests and challenge were constant. Geese broke fences, rabbits tunneled, insects chewed tender leaves, drought withered seedlings, too much rain rotted roots. Yet resilience marked gardeners, sow again, mulch with straw, try new patch next year. Seed saving was treasure. Families traded beans or kale seeds across generations. Not all gardens were poor. Wealthier homesteads or monastic granges had ordered plots with box hedges, fountains, and exotic herbs. But being there, work smelled of earth and sweat, hands dirtied the same way. Monks wrote herbals cataloguing plants, peasant women held lore just as deep though unwritten. The garden touched every meal. Morning pottage spiced with parsley and thyme, stews thickened with beans and onions, cabbages stewed with bacon, salads of herbs on feast days. Healing teas came from dried mint and sage, salves from marigold and beeswax. Dye kettles turned yarn brilliant for winter weaving. In evenings, when work done, garden rested, sun set behind hedge, bees quieted, and smell of warm earth lingered. Parents sat on bench, child in lap, watching hens settle. Lantern or rushlight might glow by door, but stars gave truer light. All day's food and medicine whispered out there, waiting for tomorrow. Festivals marked garden too, May Day crowned with flowers, midsummer fires blessed herbs, harvest feasts thanked for cabbages and apples. Families gave first fruits to church or poor, believing generosity kept soil kind. Though humble, the cottage garden was quiet power. It made poor less hungry, sick less helpless, cloth more colorful, and lives more rooted. Each seed sown was act of faith against winter's lean. Each herb cut bound family to centuries of tradition. So when you picture medieval life, do not forget the small fenced patch, buzzing with bees, green with cabbage and sage, alive with hands working slow magic of growth. Here survival and simple joy grew side by side, season after season. Outside, night has come early. Snow lies deep on thatched roofs, and wind rattles shutters with long, low sighs. Inside the cottage, the hearth glows, red logs stacked over steady coals, iron pot hung from the crane, warmth spreading to every corner. After a day of cold fields, mending, or wood cutting, the family gathers for their winter supper, the simplest of meals, yet rich with comfort and shared life. The room is single and low, smoke-stained but warm. Rough beams overhead hang with drying herbs, apples strung in garlands, and slabs of bacon curing in cool draughts. Clay floor swept, rushes fresh with herbs for scent. By the fire stands long wooden table, well scrubbed but scarred with years of knives and bread loaves. Benches line its sides, a high-backed chair for the eldest or head of house faces hearth. Before meal begins, someone tends fire, a boy stirring embers, or the mother laying another log. Sparks flare and shadows dance on walls. Kettles sing softly, steam curling fragrant with onions, cabbage, and smoked pork. The smell fills room long before bowls appear, stirring hunger and easing the day's weariness. Cooking in winter follows the season's limits. Fresh greens are few, cabbages from pit, dried peas, beans, stored onions, and garlic form base of stew. Bits of bacon or ham bone add strength. Sometimes dried mushrooms from autumn woods give dark flavor. Bread baked days before lies ready, hard crust softened by fire's warmth. If family lucky, a crock of butter or cheese waits. If wealthier, a jug of ale or thin wine stands near. Children play near warmth, while food simmers quiet games with wooden dolls or carved animals, or just staring into flames, drowsy. Older ones help, slicing bread, fetching water from barrel kept indoors so it will not freeze. Conversation drifts, talk of weather, hopes for next market, tales of saints or family lore. Sometimes neighbors or kin join. Winter nights can be lonely. A guest brightens room, they stamp snow from boots, hang cloaks by fire, offer news of village or road, Stories swell louder, punctuated by crack of wood and bubbling of pot. Hospitality matters even when food plain, sharing warmth and drink is holy and human. Finally, stew is ready. The mother or cook ladles into wooden bowls. Father carves extra meat if any saved. Each receives share not equal, but fair. Elders and workers need strength. Children get smaller bowls but extra bread. Before eating, a brief prayer thanks God for food and safe shelter. Candles or rushlights glow, their small flames doubled in eyes around table. Eating is slow and companionable. Spoons scrape wood, bread soaks broth, steam fogs faces. Conversation pauses for warmth of mouthfuls, then resumes, plans for tomorrow's chores, weaving, repairs, maybe small gossip about Lord Steward or neighbor's new pig. Outside wind moans but seems far away. If it is feast season, Christmas, Epiphany, supper brightens. Perhaps a small roast, spiced cakes, or honeyed apples appear. Candles multiply, carols sung softly. Children receive nuts or dried fruit, treasured treats. Even poor families save something special for these holy nights, believing joy invites blessing. Light and shadow weave quietly. Fire throws dancing images on beams, saints, medals, drying herbs, tools stacked ready. Cats purr at edge of warmth, dog sighs asleep by door. Crackle and pop of logs join hum of talk. Time seems to slow, held safe within thick walls and long tradition. After bowls emptied, chores resume briefly, dishes rinsed with hot water, ash and sand scrubbing, scraps tossed to animals, pot hung aside for morning porridge, fire banked low but left glowing, vital spark for dawn, children tucked on pallets near warmth, wrapped in wool or straw-filled mattress. Elders linger a little longer, telling one last tale or prayer. Sometimes evenings bring small craft. Father mends harness, mother spins wool, older boy whittles spoon. Music may come if lute or pipe owned. More often a voice lifts in song, gentle and slow. Stories of saints, heroes, or long-gone kin circle the hearth, teaching and entertaining. Beyond door, darkness deep and cold. Snow falls on silent lane, muffling world. Wolves may howl distant. Church bell may sound hour. But inside is warmth, bread-filled bellies, shared company. It is a small fortress against winter, humble yet strong. Such suppers repeated night after night built quiet survival, no grand banquets, no music of minstrels, yet these meals nourished Europe as surely as any feast. They taught thrift, patience, sharing. They wrapped families in heat and light, while cold pressed close. So when you think of medieval home, picture not only toil and hunger, but also this winter supper by the hearth. Slow stew, sturdy bread, lamplight and laughter softened by tired joy. It is a scene of ordinary grace, warming body and soul through the long, dark season. The day in the Abbey has been long but unhurried, filled with work and prayer, meals and small kindnesses. Now the sun is sinking beyond the fields, and a hush begins to gather like a slow tide. The bell in the tower tolls a single low note, rolling over the cloisters and gardens, calling the brothers to evening prayer. Lanterns flicker to life along the covered walks as sandals whisper toward the great church. In the nave, shadows stretch long across the worn flagstones. Candles glow in steady rows, their flames small but sure against the deepening dusk. The air smells of cool stone, beeswax, and the faint green breath of the garden carried in by evening breeze. One by one, monks enter and bow before taking their stalls in the choir. They come without haste, yet none linger. The rhythm of this hour is well known to all. Vespers begins with a single voice, low and resonant. Another joins, then another, until the whole choir breathes the psalms together. The sound is deep and warm, rising like incense toward the dark rafters above. No note is forced, no word hurried. It is music shaped by centuries, meant not to dazzle, but to soothe and lift hearts heavenward as night approaches. Outside the high windows, the last gold of sunset fades to violet. Birds settle in the eaves. The first bats flit against the glowing sky. Inside, the chant flows on, timeless and unbroken. The abbot leads the prayers with quiet strength, his voice neither louder nor softer than any other, yet steady as a bell. When the Magnificat is sung, the brothers stand, their habits swaying gently as they lift their hearts with merry song. When the final psalm ends, silence holds for a breath before the abbot gives the blessing. A deep Amen answers, and the service closes without applause or fanfare, only calm gratitude. The monks file out again, candles in hand to light the cloister's darkening paths. Outside, night has deepened. The first stars shimmer faintly above the abbey roof. The refectory glows with soft lantern light as the evening meal is shared. It is a simple supper, bread baked this morning, a thin broth fragrant with herbs from the garden, a few apples sliced and passed along the table. The reader's voice is absent tonight. Vespers has filled the need for words. The meal is eaten in silence, each monk savoring the quiet as much as the food. After supper, bowls and boards are cleaned with efficient care. Brothers move gently about their tasks, no sound louder than the clink of pottery or the faint rush of water from the kitchen cistern. Laughter is rare but not forbidden. Sometimes a small smile passes between friends, a wordless gladness for the day shared. When all is done, the abbey settles further. Some brothers return to the cloister walks, pacing slowly beneath the lanterns as they pray the rosary. Others visit the garden one last time to breathe the cool night air. The fountain trickles softly, and the scent of damp herbs mingles with distant wood smoke. The hives are silent now. Bees rest after their day's labor. The church doors remain open for a little while longer, inviting private prayer. A few monks slip inside to kneel alone before the altar. Candles burn steadily, their light gilding the stone and wood in gentle gold. Shadows sway on the walls as the flames tremble. These last moments before full night are cherished. Time to speak heart to God in solitude, to lay down worries before sleep. At last the bell tolls again, softer now, a call to Compline, the final prayer. All gather once more in the church, but the mood is changed from Vespers. If Vespers is a warm sunset, Compline is a quiet lullaby. The chant is low, tender, and brief. Psalms of trust, prayers for safety in the dark hours ahead. Into your hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit, they sing, and the words seem to settle over every stone. When the last note fades, the abbot sprinkles holy water down the rows, blessing each brother. Heads bow, a faint sigh of peace ripples through the gathered men. Then the candles are carried out, and the church darkens behind them, left with only the steady glow of the sanctuary lamp. The cloisters now are quiet but alive with soft light. Lanterns sway gently in the night breeze. Their golden circles of illumination pool on the flagstones. Monks walk in twos or alone, heading back to the dormitory or lingering for one more silent prayer. No speech breaks the calm, only the sound of sandals and the whisper of robes. Stars wheel above the abbey roof, brilliant now in the deep night. The air is cool and smells of damp earth and herbs. Somewhere an owl calls softly from the orchard. Somewhere else a door closes with a muffled thud. The porter makes his final round, checking gates and locks, moving with the ease of long habit. When he is satisfied, he bows briefly toward the church and retires. Inside the dormitory, beds await in quiet rows. Brothers undress in silence, fold habits neatly, and slip beneath simple woolen blankets. A few read by candle for a short while, small prayer books held close, then snuff the flame and settle. Others kneel briefly at their beds before lying down. One by one the room fills with the soft sound of breathing. The abbey itself seems to sleep now. The scriptorium lies dark, its quills cleaned and laid aside. The garden rests under silver moonlight. The refectory is empty, but still smells faintly of bread and herbs. Only the sanctuary lamp burns on, a small flame keeping watch through the hours until dawn. Beyond the walls, the fields grow pale with starlight. A stream glimmers faintly as it winds past orchard and meadow. Villages nearby have long gone to their beds, comforted by the sight of the abbey's steady tower against the sky. Its bell is silent for now, but its presence alone is enough to promise safety and prayer. Deep night holds the abbey gently. Its silence is it empty but full of faith, of work well done, of lives given to prayer and service. The stars wheel on, the lamp burns quietly, and within, the brothers rest in the great stillness they have sought all day. The peace here feels older than stone, older even than song, a quiet that carries through centuries and cradles all who surrender to it. When the first faint light touches the horizon, the bell will wake and call again. But for now night reigns, soft, safe, and filled with a listening silence. It is a silence that comforts, a silence that blesses, a silence that whispers of rest deeper than sleep.